I'm Uwe Ellinghaus and you are watching Behind the Brand.
I think about my early 20s, and I think that I actually missed an opportunity there to experiment and fail and
I
experiment
really
and fail.
admire my mother. Despite what people said, she bought me a sewing machine and she let me play with dolls. She really dared to let me be different.
Focus on the fact that we're young, and I wanted them to understand that we're here to make a difference for the country.
The funny thing about risk is that I don't really consider it a risk. If you get out there too far, it looks like a big risk. But when you're inside it,
More than anything else,
it doesn't even feel like a risk.
To me, I started thinking when I was young, what are definitions of good? What will you do to be a good person in the world? And it always boiled down to
Hi, I'm Bryan Elliott. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Brand. Today we're here at the New York Auto Show. I'm here with Cadillac CMO, Uwe Ellinghaus. Uwe, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
I usually ask my guests, how'd you get this job?
Oh God, I wish I knew. I have a certain reputation in this very industry that I'm in because I worked for BMW for 15 years and ended up as their CMO, and that's probably how I somehow got into this job.
So you're working with Cadillac, a legacy brand. Mm-hmm. We've seen the campaign. It's actually really cool. It's really, the messaging is about daring greatly.
Yes.
It's a message to entrepreneurs, something that I can really resonate with.
Good.
And I know my audience does, because there's a lot of people who watch this show who are entrepreneurs. Talk to us about the campaign. Talk to us about the brand and what you're doing new this year.
I'm glad first and foremost that you like the campaign. So do I, but I'm behind it. You expected me saying this. Yeah, you raise a very good point. I think what we really want to do is we want to build a contemporary premium or luxury brand that no longer says we are about a certain target group. We aspire to a certain lifestyle. We want to say that we are the brand for all those people that dare greatly. And whether they are young or old, female or male, it simply doesn't matter. Everybody with this spirit to go behind convention, to invent things anew, to have the mindset of believing in yourself and that the future is better than the present is something that we want to reach out to. And we've all enough of traditional automotive branding where it's about SUVs on beaches and convertibles on coastal roads, and I simply didn't get here in this very job that I now have to prolongate this. I wanted a completely new approach.
So where did you go for resource? Where did you go to come up with this idea? Because you know, it sort of takes one to know one, right? Like,
yes.
Unless you're an entrepreneur or have been there and done that, it's very hard to relate.
It is absolutely. But one thing is for sure, entrepreneurials are the new rock stars. Everybody likes entrepreneurs. Everybody likes the spirit of Silicon Valley, particularly Generation X and Y, and they are the future luxury buyers. So it wasn't really rocket science to find out that the old corporate world is no longer appealing, and financial institutions and Wall Street are probably among the uncoolest places for younger customers when you ask them what are you actually aspiring to. Yet if you look into the automotive arena and how brands are communicating with their target audiences, you realize that it's still full of bankers and wankers, if you forgive me for saying so.
Yeah.
And we wanted to reach out to customers who say, no, I believe in myself, I go my own way. And we also needed some context, and we just felt as an American brand, Silicon Valley fits nicely, but Silicon Valley does not necessarily have a recognition. If you show a backdrop of a certain building in the Silicon Valley, the world will not understand that it is Silicon Valley. And that's why we got this idea that the spirit that we want to convey in our communication is the spirit of Silicon Valley, the entrepreneurial spirit, but we couple it with the backdrops, if you want, of downtown New York, Soho, Brooklyn, the cool parts of New York, not Wall Street, not Midtown. No cliches, no Empire State Building, and of course also to show that contemporary American luxury, in contrast to European luxury, is casual.
That's awesome. So talk to us about entrepreneurs a little bit. Have you ever been an entrepreneur?
I have never been an entrepreneur. I belong to Generation X, when it was still cool to enter huge corporations. And a company like BMW had so much appeal for me that I never tried it. But I admit that I had my moments in my long career, which we all have, admittedly, where I thought, why didn't I actually do that? And I do not exclude, as we speak, that one day I might walk away from the corporate world and try it. At the very end, if you have the mindset, the age shouldn't matter. After all, age is mind over matter. As long as you don't mind, it doesn't matter. So I don't exclude that maybe in a couple of years' time, I'd be tempted to try and become an entrepreneur myself.
Yeah. Do you have an idea you're working on in the
No,
garage?
yeah, but it has nothing to do with management. So don't expect me to be a consultant. I would probably do something completely off.
Do you have an invention or something you've come up with? Tell us.
Yeah,
Give us a little hint.
Yeah, let's put it this way. I'm probably only a mediocre CMO, but I'm not a mediocre cook and I'm not a mediocre wine connoisseur. And maybe that offers entrepreneurial territory.
Something in the food category.
Yes, maybe opening my own wine bar. But then I would be my best customer and the worst salesman, because I would always think if new customers come in, you are not the kind of person that deserve this wonderful treat of wine. And that's the wrong mindset for an entrepreneur, right?
So in your personal opinion, do you think that being an entrepreneur is something we're born with, or is it learned?
It's a very good question. I think many people are simply born with the spirit to trust themselves, but of course an education plays an important role. If you have parents that encourage you to simply be yourself and dare greatly, even if others call you strange, a maverick or whatever, but you simply have the guts to go your own way, that's a great prerequisite. But I also know people who grew up in families that had no attachment to the entrepreneurial world, but got so excited about the mere idea that they were their own masters of their destiny rather than corporate slaves, that they decided it's worth trying. Some were successful, some were not, but I think you can acquire it. It's a gift if you are born with it.
Yeah. Do you think it's more difficult, so now maybe if we're looking down the stream a little bit in your life,
Yes.
5, 10, 20, who knows how long you
Yes.
may start your restaurant or
Okay.
entrepreneur venture. Do you think it's harder to start something now that you've had all this sort of corporate experience, or maybe you've had the good life, you've had the cushion or the net, or is it easier to think when you have everything to gain and nothing to lose?
Yeah, I think it's actually easier. Let's face it, why do many people not become entrepreneurs? Not that they find it unappealing to be the master of their own destiny. Who would disagree that this is a desirable situation? What they can't live with is uncertainty, is risk, and it's the idea of failure.
Yeah.
And I totally agree that I belong to a generation that was always told we don't do failure. And you know what? That's the completely wrong attitude. And I think that this is a real entrepreneur, and as in the famous speech from Theodore Roosevelt, it all concludes with, and if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly.
Right.
And this is also something that the corporate world can learn from entrepreneurs, that failure is not the end of the world. It's the way you handle it and how you proceed from there.
Yeah.
And if you have achieved something and no longer need to have, let's say, the income stream as guaranteed as corporate animals have it, I think it makes it much easier to explore if you are an entrepreneur. You simply have less risk and maybe some means to cope in the initial phase when, let's face it, it's the toughest year in the business when you start.
Yeah. So bringing it back full circle. So if you weren't doing what you are doing today,
Yes.
and you wanted to start that new venture, do you think it would be easier to do today or more difficult to do today?
I think that the digital age and breaking through the clutter and the digital channel makes entrepreneurialism much easier than it was in the past. It was simply very difficult before the internet to simply be heard and be noticed. And thanks to the internet, even a individual can have a striking internet presence. Whether there is any substance behind the offer, whatever it is, remains to be seen.
Yeah.
But it is much easier to connect with the rest of the world as it was before, when you simply needed to spend a fortune on communicating your own business and your reason to exist and what you had to bring to the table.
In fact, say hello, say hi, internet, right, in that camera.
Okay,
because
hi, internet.
We're broadcasting this live.
Okay, I forgot that.
Yeah.
Hi, internet.
Throwing up questions.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll take a couple of those in a second. Talk to us about the marketing mix. So obviously you're doing a ton of traditional. We're seeing the campaign all over TV. But what other kind of outreach are you doing? And how did you arrive at that's the best decision?
Okay, that's a very good point. We still need the old media world that we marketing people used to call above the line, although nobody really knows what the line actually is and if it ever existed. So TV and print. And in luxury in particular, in lifestyle magazines, you need to have a presence. In automotive, you need to have a presence in car magazines for the enthusiast reader.
Sure.
But going forward, I think the development is towards digital, but it's also, and maybe even more importantly, towards experiential branding. I think that younger, educated customers, particularly entrepreneurs, are highly skeptical to traditional marketing messages. They find them a little too overt and very mainstream.
Yeah.
And they want us
It's BS. We're being trained to ignore it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So whilst we still need it, I think delivering customers experiences they don't forget is the way forward. But I don't want to do the usual things in experiential branding, which in automotive tends to be golf, tennis, or motorsport.
White guy sports.
Yeah, and let's face it, this is the baby boomer generation.
Yeah.
Generation X and Y are not interested in motorsport, or everything I ever learned about them is wrong, right? But also, I want to avoid that we go to the territory that our German arch rivals occupy. And Cadillac is a brand so rich in heritage, so closely related to the American culture, a cultural icon, a music icon, a fashion icon, that I think if we do experiential branding, sponsorships of a fashion show like we did in New York the other week, it is just far more credible for Cadillac and also more differentiating. There is what I call a conceptual link between the brand and the venue, and this is something that golf simply doesn't deliver.
Yeah. I agree and disagree. I mean, I think it's a legacy brand. It's a brand name that's iconic.
Yes.
That's part of our pop culture.
It
but
is.
I think in many ways it's become irrelevant.
Yes, it is.
Because
I wouldn't
Cadillac-
disagree.
Yeah,
Brian,
because-
I wouldn't disagree. Yeah.
Cadillac has ignored us for
Yes.
all these years.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, but I think good on you for coming back to the table.
Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah.
It's a spot-on analysis.
Yeah.
Cadillac doesn't have an awareness problem. Cadillac doesn't necessarily have an image problem. It's not that people talk badly about us. We are almost irrelevant. Oh, are they still alive, right? But you need to see the interesting development started with the baby boomers walking away from Cadillac. And maybe it was Cadillac's fault that for all the right reasons they ended up in their BMWs, their Audis, their Mercedeses. But you can also not ignore the fact that these customers like their German cars, but are aging in their German cars. And for Generation Y, grandfather's car is not a Cadillac. Grandfather was already driving a BMW and an Audi.
Right.
So they don't have all this baggage, the legacy of grandfather's car. Or if a car brand has, it's probably more the Germans. And I really think that we could become the new cool, because I totally
It's a
believe,
clean slate.
Yeah, I totally believe in one thing. Younger generations want to distance themselves from their ancestors. Well, I wouldn't want to have any furniture in my home that my mother fancies, and I think that has not changed the world over. So I believe that in a couple of years' time, the Germans, however successful and great they currently are, will become uncool. And I want Cadillac to become the new cool for Generation Y, and hopefully for many entrepreneurs.
So do you think, I mean, it was very strategic that they brought a German with German roots from a German company that's a category leader in to sort of reinvigorate this brand? I mean, is that why you have this job?
I certainly had a certain market value because of my experience at BMW, but I said everybody from the beginning, I'm not coming here to emulate what I did at BMW. I will help you to build an alternative to a BMW. The great thing about BMW is that the entire industry kind of admires the success and thinks that the way forward is by emulating them. And I always said in the past, why should anybody buy a good copy if there's an original available? And that's why when I started at Cadillac, I said, we will not out-German the Germans. We will go our own way. We are American, says the German in the room, and proud of it. And we are bolder. We are more optimistic. We are more forward-looking. We want more distinctive cars.
Well, you have nothing to lose at this point.
That's the great thing.
It's like being an entrepreneur starting for the first time.
Yes, it is. And you know what? Sometimes I feel like in a 113-year-old startup, if you forgive me for saying
No,
so.
I totally get it.
The entrepreneurial degree of freedom that I enjoy in this job is outstanding. I don't think that there are many corporate jobs out where you have this degree of freedom. Firstly, I have the support from Mary Barra and Dan Emmon, CEO and president. That helps, no doubt. But it's also this willingness to really say, whatever we did with Cadillac in the past has obviously not worked.
Yeah.
As it has not led to the desired volumes we wanted to have or the image gains. So why don't we reinvent what we are doing?
Back to the drawing board.
Back to the drawing board.
Talk to us about this kind of experiential thing you have going on with the skiers. I think that's very interesting, you know, tapping into action sports, photography.
Yes.
Talk to us about that a little bit.
As we all know, for younger generations, it is no longer a desirable life to work 80 hours a week. And we need to reach out into the leisure world. Luxury cars are natural in the business world, but the SUV boom is partly led by the fact that these cars simply are still appropriate for business, but allow for a much higher versatility. And our SRX is doing very, very well in this target group of customers who say, I simply need more space for my sport gadget, for my bike, for whatever it is.
Yep.
And that's why I think the SUV boom will last. And sedans will always be there and are appropriate as the business car, not necessarily for the entrepreneur, more for the corporate animal who wants a safe choice. But I really think we cannot wait and sit until customers are ready to come to a Cadillac dealership for a test drive. I'm totally convinced that we need to reach out to new target groups. Just to give you another example.
So let me ask you, how do you find these people? Because I think it's brilliant. I mean, I really think it's not about the masses anymore, even though, you have to check the box.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to do your national
Tick
TV.
the box there.
You have to do, national print, that's fine,
Yes.
enthusiast print, I get
Yes.
it. But you're also going very niche, narrow and deep.
Yes.
And so how do you find those people? Because I know people watch this show, they're also marketers.
Yes.
And they want to know the secret sauce. You know,
Okay.
how do you find these people,
Okay.
the influencers,
Okay.
and the lifestyle?
Talk
about that a little bit.
It's very good. Of course, we know where certain customers live with regard to certain sociodemographics, income level, and others. But these variables no longer can predict purchase behavior. So we are not going into certain areas where we expect a certain target group. It's not about overt targeting. We simply have an own point of view, and we always try to look at other brands or branding opportunities like corporations that allow us to build a bridge between another group of human beings and us. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
American Airlines, we have a partnership with them. So we chauffeur their best customers, the Admiral Club members, many entrepreneurs among them, on the tarmac individually to their planes. And
Like a white glove service.
yes, and you can say, and we have cars on display in airports. So you can say, why American Airlines? But you know what? If there is one iconic American airline that's also a great brand in transition,
I see.
it is American Airlines.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so American roots and iconic American brands and iconic American events, be it fashion weeks or others, are natural places because of our iconic American heritage.
So you really, you have a tough job because not only are you rebranding Cadillac, you're rebranding American heritage, American quality, buying
Yes.
America.
Absolutely, and I'm convinced there is a contemporary America out there, and this is an America where the pioneering spirit and the optimism at the very end are probably the biggest asset in this country. You Americans underestimate it, but Europeans are never optimistic. Germans are always pessimistic, regardless how good their financial situation is.
Yes, and our American soccer or football is a great example because
Yes.
we're maybe not the most talented team yet,
No.
but what we have is heart.
Absolutely.
And we find a way to win. We're
Absolutely.
scrappy. We're pioneers. Clint Dempsey got his nose broken in the World Cup.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
And we're the underdog too.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a very, very good example. And I think this is also universally appealing. That America has this fundamental belief, we will make it. We have had so many problems in our history and always evolved stronger. And this set of community that America still has, despite all the differences that are obvious, this is still one nation. And whether it is the enemy from outside or whether it is a huge challenge that we faced with September 11, this country is overnight behind the nation, and that's something that is a great spirit.
Uwe, do you feel like the underdog here, like with your brand? And
We
the task that you have
we are the challenger brand, as I prefer to call it, rather than the underdog brand. But of course, we will not win the race for volume in the luxury space, but this is not our ambition. We want to be different, and proudly so.
Yeah. What keeps you up at night? What are you really afraid of? Like, what are the consequences? I know, Mary Barra got a lot of heat recently over the last year.
Yes.
Kind of her neck feels like it's on the chopping block.
I have all the trust in her that this company will flourish under her. She wants to transform General Motors. I want to transform, together with my boss, Renaissance of Cadillac. So in this regard, we are a marriage in heaven. No, I am not fearing any catastrophes because I'm an optimist by nature. That's probably the only entrepreneurial trait I already have. But I think the biggest challenge is complacency. I came from a company that's very, very successful, but I also realized that in a successful corporation, and an entrepreneur is no different to that, it's very difficult to challenge the status quo. Why should we change if the things are right and working? But complacency is the first risk, because you simply rest too much on your laurels.
Well, so who's in your way? Who's your obstacle?
My biggest obstacle, I don't even think I have obstacles.
But like challenging the status quo, so is it internal?
No, not necessarily. We have a lot of support. Look at investment into Cadillac,
so it's
8
external.
new cars. Yeah, there is of course a certain, dare I say it, cynicism about Cadillac, because Cadillac's Renaissance was announced probably 55 times. So I have a certain lack of credibility when I say, but this time we are serious. But whether you believe me or not, you cannot overlook the fact that never ever in the 113-year-old history of Cadillac has the company had so much momentum. The investment in the new cars, the move to New York, if that doesn't show that this is not just a marketing campaign, but really the renaissance of an iconic brand, what is required to win you over?
Well, I think a lot of people say, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, okay.
And that's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Can you weigh in really fast on the success of the Lincoln campaign with Matthew McConaughey and all that?
Well,
it's been written up a lot in like Ad Week and Brad
well,
Week.
I never comment on any competitors in the public domain, and that's something that I want to live up to here as well. I only say one thing. If you think that our approach, showing Steve Wozniak, showing Jason Wu and the other protagonists during the Oscars, is a similar route, no, it's the very opposite. We are not showing celebrities in our cars. We show people with an entrepreneurial mindset that dare greatly. And they are not brand ambassadors, or however you want to call them, testimonials, we called them in advertising 10 years ago. They are just embodying the spirit that we have as well. They dared greatly, they did something differently, and they were successful. And that's what we hope to be as well.
And that's exactly what I wanted to get at, is maybe draw a comparison between the two approaches, because I really do think your approach is authentic. And when I saw the campaign, I'll be perfectly honest, I got goosebumps.
Did you?
And mainly because it strikes such a chord with me.
Yes.
Because I'm in the trenches right now.
Yes.
It's my life.
Yes, absolutely.
I know how it feels.
Yes.
And the people that you featured, whether it's Wozniak or some of these others, they have been there and they've done that.
Yes.
And so those are the people that we look to for leadership, for direction, for inspiration.
Yeah, they are role models, and I also like their diversity. And I also think that having a spirit is at the very end what we also want to bring to the table. Whilst you might not like us, whilst you might not agree with our point of view, at least we have one. And these characters all have a point of view as well.
Yeah. Contrast that with the campaign that you had, was it last year or the year before?
Oh God, when we poked at the French.
Yeah, it was very polarizing.
Yeah, it was very polarizing.
Yeah, and it was very 60-year-old white guy, right back to, why
Yeah.
everyone says that you're not going to make it.
Yes, and well, I admit I inherited that piece. I'm not
Yeah.
particularly proud of it, but I arrived too late to stop it. So I always had to defend it in the public domain. But I also say that the huge flaw is that this was again the world of old success,
Yeah.
and I want to show the world of new success.
Yeah.
And when you have a guy turning around calling a $28 million house, why are we working so hard for this like stuff? It's not particularly helpful if even the 1% have the impression that a Cadillac is probably not for them.
Yeah. What is the thing that you're most proud of?
That whatever I did was something that I could still afterwards look into the mirror and said, it was okay, Uwe. I never was pushed beyond my own boundaries and said, this was no longer you. I never allowed anybody to change my character. I paid a high price for that because I have the reputation of being a maverick. But on the other hand, I simply couldn't do my job any longer if I didn't have a fundamental belief in how to do it, even accepting that it has limits and that every once in a while I need a compromise, just like everybody. But when it comes to my fundamental conviction, and if they are challenged or undermined, I simply go somewhere else.
So one last thought. Maybe look over my shoulder into the camera.
I will do.
And talk to the entrepreneurs who watch this show and tell them, you know, what is your message? What is Cadillac's message to them as entrepreneurs?
Okay, my message to you as entrepreneurs is that as much as you dare greatly and you take far more risk and you accept that failure is part of the equation, you will soon find that Cadillac, believe it or not, good old Cadillac, is following exactly the same lines. And therefore, give us at least a chance and take a second look at the brand that probably was not in the relevant set in the first place when it comes to buying your next car. And in a couple of years' time, you will deeply regret that you are sitting in one of the ubiquitous German cars and everybody is saying, why are you driving what the entire neighborhood already drives?
We've been spending a few minutes with Uwe Ellinghaus. Uwe, thanks for being on the show.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Bryan.
Thank you.